Welcome into the Big City Sports Podcast. We have another episode coming up. And last week you saw our predictions, or not necessarily, I guess it was a little bit of predictions of the Jets, Giants, and Bears. This week we're breaking down the entire NFL. Obviously, this episode will drop at noon on Thursday, right before the NFL season kicks off between the Dallas Cowboys and, of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Bradyville, Dak goes back there. But we're joined by two guests today. Obviously, Swig as usual, and we're also brought on by Nicholas Black. Swig, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Just don't call me a guest. Am I not on here every week? But I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk about the whole league. We're not going to go super in depth on any teams today. For anyone curious, anyone curious on the Giants, Jets, and Bears, listen to last week's show. But we're going to go a little bit faster paced, whole league, and then excited to have my friend Nick on here, one of our loyal listeners. I'm excited to hear his opinions on a team I hate.
Yeah, so let's get to know Nick. Obviously, he's got the Eagles hat rocking today. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Excited to be on and ready to talk about Jalen Hurts and Fly Eagles Fly today.
All right, you know what? Let's just start right there. Let's start in the NFC East. Obviously, it's got the nickname NFC Least over the last year or so, with a little bit of fiddling teams not knowing what they want to do when it comes to taking advantage of a weak division. But there's a lot of things going around all of these teams. And let's start right with your Eagles. They come in, obviously, off of a strange year last season where Carson Wentz now departs. Jalen Hurts steps in. How do you feel about Jalen Hurts?
There's a lot to like, a lot of unknowns from last year. I mean, you got to start with his leadership, his work ethic. I mean, that's what the players around him always rave about, is just how good of a leader he is. And then, I mean, you have the ability to run. He has the read option, really good running game. The throwing aspect has been his question marks, is can he make all the throws? Can he make the outside the number throws? And can he lead a team to victory and not have a good defense behind, not just running game? Because when he was in college, he had all the talent around him. And now he's on a team where he has to take over. And that's a huge question mark, and kind of what we're all looking forward to see what he's capable of doing.
Yeah, obviously Jalen Hurts is going to be the biggest storyline for the Eagles this upcoming season, how he progresses in his second year after a little bit of promise, I would say, to end his rookie season. Now, one of the other storylines is the Eagles kind of cleared house with their coaching staff. They have a new head coach, Nick Sirianni, the former Colts offensive coordinator. Start with a simple question. How do you feel about that hire?
I don't mind the hire. I think it's what Jeffrey Lurie and Harry Roseman wanted. They're not big into the type of coach that like wants to have all control of the team. Jeffrey Lurie and Harry Roseman wants the most control, and a coach that kind of just listens and follows, for what I've seen, what I've read. But I don't want to go against Nick Sirianni's football knowledge. I think he's very smart, did a really good job with the Colts, and I expect really good things. I'm hoping for really good things. I just know that Jeffrey Lurie and Harry Roseman can be very pushy on what they want over what the coach thinks what's best for the team.
Yeah, I look at that and I see Nick Sirianni, someone, of course, that played a big role in Phillip Rivers' career during his time in San Diego, obviously, before they switched to LA. But Sirianni, a great, he could do wonders for a quarterback. And I see Jalen Hurts. And if you look at the offense they ran, obviously, in LA, it was get the ball out quick. They have a lot of speed, take advantage of that. I expect a little bit like that. I'm not going to bring up the dreaded name of Chip Kelly. Obviously, no huddle in this situation, but sort of that up-tempo speed sort of thing. So how do you think the offense looks, not only from Hurts' perspective, but the tempo?
Well, I think it's going to go really well, because what the offense for the Colts did a really great job was, before Marlon Mack got hurt, was really a good rotation of the running backs, is using the running backs in all sorts of different ways. And I think Miles Sanders can really step up behind a very good offensive line when it's healthy, because that was a big downfall last year, was a lot of injuries up front. And I think if that stays up healthy up front, you have a really good running game, you got rotation. And just what we need to work on probably is the weapons we have around. Dallas Goedert is very solid. Zach Ertz has been getting older, a little slower, still reliable. You got to see what Devontae Smith can do, and hopefully Jalen Reagor can keep progressing. And it will really help for Jalen Hurts' perspective to really get those young guys start moving forward for him, so he can keep progressing in his career as well.
Yeah, the weapons were the next thing I actually wanted to talk about. So you mentioned the running back rotation. Miles Sanders, I think, is the clear number one running back in Philly, but I think the depth behind him with Kenneth Gainwell being drafted in the 5th round, we know what Boston Scott's capable of out of the backfield. Claiming Kerryon Johnson off waivers from Detroit, so there are some solid complementary options there. But what I'm expecting to see is, like, I agree with more of a short passing, quick tempo, get the ball out of his hands quick kind of offense. And do you think that with the two wide receivers you mentioned, with Devontae Smith and Jalen Reagor, likely to be the starters, they're both twitchier, short area quickness kind of guys who thrive in the short game. So we already kind of know what to expect out of Devontae Smith, I would say, a little more. He's played with Jalen Hurts before, but do you think that this is a better system for both of them than the one that Doug Peterson would have implemented last season?
I think it definitely can, especially I think they fit better with the style Jalen Hurts is. Very spread, wide open, like you said, very quick throws, a lot of screens, a lot of hitches, slants, very quick, sudden, quick throws that are really just about timing. It ain't no concepts in it, nothing really too complex, and I think that's what these young receivers need right now, and especially with Jalen Hurts, that probably biggest questions, understanding the field and going from one read to the next is these quick, simple dump offs, read options, RPOs type things, very quick. And I think that's how he's going to progress over the year.
And looking at last question here with the Eagles before we get into the rest of the NFC East, I'm curious what your thoughts on the defense are right now. I mean, you ever since 2004, it seems like they're a pass rush team, and then they got safeties. That's basically how they went. Linebackers, okay, but I mean, you sign Nelson at a quarterback spot. You have Darius Slay there. I think that's a huge upgrade at the corner position. Then you bring over an Anthony Harris and a couple people from the Minnesota Vikings defense that could really impact them.
Yeah, so what's always been, like you said, it's always about upfront. What the Eagles always thought is the linebacker has always been like the last resort in their defense, because it comes up front, you get the pressure, and if you have solid back end, the linebackers, you can hold off a bit. So with the signing of Steven Nelson and you got Darius Slay coming back, now he will hold all that pressure from last year. Avonte Maddox is a huge name, I think, will take a huge leap this year because he's not an outside corner, and I think bringing Steven Nelson in will really put him back in the nickel kind of combo safety that they did 2 years ago that really showed promise for him. And with our new defensive coordinator, Jonathan Gannon, having him from the DB's coach from Indianapolis would be a really good help, bringing Anthony Harrison. And then you still got Ronnie McLeod, a very good veteran captain that will really help. I just think that our biggest issue right now is the linebackers. Alex Singleton, very poor in pass coverage. We did bring in Eric Wilson, who can be really good with the run stuffing, but when it comes to pass coverage, these guys aren't the greatest, and it's always been a problem against tight ends over the years. And it probably will continue, but you can always rely on a very healthy, dependent pass rush that they can always switch in and out with Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, Derek Barnett, Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox. Yeah, a lot of different pieces that will keep coming in and out. They'll stay fresh. And that's the one thing they can keep on relying on.
And let's get into the Giants. Obviously, Eagles, we'll get into the predictions here in a second, how they all finish. But Slig, you're rocking the Saquon jersey. He just got an update saying that they're still going to think he's available for week 1. So obviously we'll see as the week progresses in that department. Rocking the Giants hat as well. We got into them a lot last week, so don't want to spend too much time on it. I know your thoughts on the team, but has anything changed over these the last week?
Honestly, no, not really. It's mostly just keeping an eye on the injury status for some of the big acquisitions the Giants made, either in free agency or in the draft, because like we mentioned, there have been concerns how many of them will be ready for week 1, whether that's Galladay or Barkley or Kadarius Toney or Adoree Jackson, who have all gotten hurt at some point this offseason, and also Kyle Rudolph. And then Evan Ingram got hurt in the last preseason game. So it's just kind of a curiosity factor, how many of them will be ready for week 1. Because one thing I'm really curious to see is the first 2 games, because I think the rosters in the NFL that are most similar to the Giants are Denver and Washington, and those are actually the Giants' first 2 opponents.
Yeah, that's a good point. Nick, I'm curious of your thoughts. Obviously an Eagles fan. How do you think the Giants will be? I know a lot of people have them hyped up, but a lot of people have them fallen off.
Well, I think there's a lot to like about the Giants. I mean, you got a top 10 defense with a very good back end that really stepped up last year that a lot of people weren't so sure about. And then they'll just keep improving under Joe Judge. Then the big thing is obviously Daniel Jones, and he is a time for him to take that lead. He has the weapons. It's now or never for most of the Giants fans. That's we can completely agree on that. But you got Kenny Galladay. Evan Ingram still can make plays. He has his drop issues, but still is a playmaker. You got Tony from the first round. You still got Sterling Shepard, and you still got Saquon and a solid change of pace, Devontae Booker right behind there. I mean, they have all the pieces and offensive line that's looking a little shaky, but definitely played well towards the end of the year last year, so it did show promise.
Yeah, they did. And I want to get to Swig one more time here on the Giants. But I want to bring up a point that I think, now, obviously, I'm a Jacksonville Jaguars fan. Laugh all you want. But I sit right here, and I see a very similar situation. I'm not saying the Giants are winning one football game at all. That's not what I'm saying here. But they were in a spot last year where, as a fan, I can go into the season and say, okay, Gardner Minshew's either going to prove that he's legit and can be that guy, or he's not, and you could still finish inside the top 5 and pick pretty nicely there. So that's where I was feeling as a Jags fan is, hey, it's the best of both worlds. Obviously, I got the best world right there with Trevor Lawrence going number 1. The Giants do have 2 first-round picks next year, so they could use that leverage if Jones does flop.
Yeah, I mean, I think every quarterback option is on the table. It's clearly a make or break year, but the difference between those two situations is Gardner Minshew was a 6th round pick. The stakes weren't quite as high considering what was invested in him. He was 6th round. Daniel Jones was 6th overall. So this is Dave Gettleman risking his legacy, his reputation on a certain quarterback who's has some positive traits, but also a lot of flaws, mainly the pocket awareness and the turnovers. And I don't think that the lack of an offensive line that I frankly just don't believe in is going to help those issues. We also have talked about the lack of creative play calling, but one piece of news I did see on the offensive line earlier today, you guys see Nate Solder is going to start the season as the starting right tackle over Matt Parrott.
Ooh, I did not see that. Interesting. I don't know how I feel about it. How do you feel about it?
Frankly, I don't either. He opted out last season and his play was declining before that. But Matt Parrott was definitely a developmental pick. He was a 3rd round, like huge guy, 6'7", great athlete, but like you might expect, was incredibly raw. There's a reason he lasted a 99th overall. He was a mixed bag. Apparently it's going to be an offensive tackle rotation with those two and Andrew Thomas, but I don't know how I feel about that either, because you feel like you want to have continuity on the line. It's definitely something I'm worried about. And I'm sure it won't make life easier for Jones not knowing who's in front of him.
Yeah, it's not going to make life easy for him. Another thing that's not going to make life easy for him is the Washington football team's front 7. They are very good, and that's where we're going to get into now. Obviously, NFC East, the next team up on the line is the Washington football team, and their defense is solid, very, very good in all aspects. Their defense is legit. They added a little bit of weapons on the outside. Curtis Samuel reuniting with head coach Ron Rivera. Antonio Gibson looks poised for a breakout season. And there's one note on Antonio Gibson I want to get into. And it's obviously rookie running backs in the NFL don't really see a lot of time on 3rd down. That's one area where coaches are like, okay, that's where you need a veteran in there that knows the pass protection, knows the playbook to a T, where they can step in. So I see sort of a decline role for J.D. McKissick and an increased role for Antonio Gibson on offense to where he could be that guy that could absolutely lead their team down the stretch. So I think there's a lot to like about the football team. What do you think?
I think there is a lot to like. I mean, you got obviously that amazing front 7 with Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, Matthew Ioannidis. I mean, it is loaded with talent. And then they also drafted the linebacker from Kentucky in the 1st round. I mean, they just keep adding that front 7. Also brought in William Jackson off the back end to help out. That was kind of their weaker side of the defensive side. Now you just add even more help like that. I mean, that defense obviously top 5. That's what everyone's projecting. The only issue I can see with the football team is Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, yes, he makes plays. He looked good with Miami at times, but what we've seen over his career is he'll give you a couple of those games where he just makes those plays and really takes over. And then he's going to give you like 4 or 5 games where he gives you those gunslinging 3-pick games where he really costs you. So it's interesting to see with Ryan Fitzpatrick, but it's hard to believe for me because of what he's done over his career and what we've seen time and time again with him.
Yeah, I think he's a great veteran presence, but I also think he's extremely inconsistent. And I think that actually fits in pretty well with Washington's team, the way they've been operating the last few years. But I do kind of look at them as a very similar team to the Giants in terms of very, very good defense, some question marks on offense. Now, obviously, the quarterback situation isn't quite the same, comparing a third-year player to a guy who's 38 years old. But in terms of the high risk, high reward, I think there's some comparables there. And then Washington's defense is more let's say stout in the front seven, while the Giants probably thrive on the back end. But the thing that I think separates Washington is that they have a much better offensive line. And while I do think there's some questions at the tackle spots, I do think that's going to be a significant factor because the playmaking ability is definitely there because they finally added to Terry McLaurin with the Curtis Samuel pickup with the second Ohio State wide receiver. And then I did like the De'Ami Brown pick in the 3rd round. I wasn't a huge fan of him going into the draft, but I thought he was good value at that spot, and he should definitely be somebody who can benefit from Fitzpatrick's strong arm in terms of making some of those chunk plays down the field. I think that's going to separate them as the season goes on.
I agree with both of you guys on Ryan Fitzpatrick. There's something he's got on his wrist. It's some sort of watch, and whenever that clock ticks, he goes from Fitzmagic to Fitztragic very quick, and you just don't know when it's going to happen. So it's going to happen eventually. We saw him with the Jets. He had weapons with Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker, and he couldn't get it together. But I mean, he even fell off with Tampa Bay. So it doesn't matter weapons or not. He's the same guy in every spot he goes. So could be interesting for Washington, but let's talk about Dallas here. Obviously, you guys both hate Dallas, and they're a team right now that has their starting quarterback coming off a pretty bad ankle injury. The offensive line looks to be healthier, but we just saw Zach Martin hit the list, and he's not going to be playing tonight. So it's going to be interesting for that. But how do you guys feel about the Cowboys? We'll start with Swig.
I think Dallas, without question, has the best offense in the division. I don't think anyone will really disagree on that if they are healthy. One of the things that derailed Dallas last season was Prescott getting injured in the first Giants game, and then 4/5 of that vaunted offensive line getting hurt at some point during the season as well. It just left them with Connor Williams, and that made life, despite all of the targets that Dallas has in terms of the talented backfield and the loaded wide receiver corps, it didn't really matter because they didn't have time to get them the ball, and that's kind of why I have so many concerns about the Giants. But looking at it from Dallas's perspective, if they're all healthy, I have pretty much no concern on their offense. What I do have concern is obviously their defense, which is one of the league's worst. And I do think Dan Quinn is going to be a positive force as a defensive coordinator. I like how he likes to use his linebackers. I think Micah Parsons is going to line up all over the field. I'm curious to see how he uses Keanu Neal, who he's familiar with from his Atlanta days. But I do think the ceiling is limited because that defense is going to be giving up 30 points a game at least half the season.
I mean, I completely agree. I mean, really the biggest thing even before Dak Prescott got hurt, there were 2-3 at the time against the Giants. So, I mean, they were, their offense was great. Obviously the weapons, I mean, who can't talk about their weapons? I mean, it's all over the place, but it's just the back end. I mean, they got DeMarcus Lawrence and then you got Micah Parsons. Now, when you add that pressure, that's going to help, but it's just, the back end really suffered. Trayvon Diggs looked like a lost puppy out there last year at times. And hopefully you're going to see that progress for him and really develop next year. And that's the goal for them. But the way he looked last year wasn't good at all. And then their linebackers really poor in coverage. Jalen Smith, Leighton Vander Esch, who can barely stay healthy half the time, really looked poor in the coverage. And you just got to see from them to believe it from their pass coverage defense.
Yeah, their defense is a glaring issue. Defense is a glaring issue.
Sorry, I wanted to make one more point about the secondary because outside of that Keanu Neal, who's kind of a hybrid safety linebacker guy, they didn't really make many moves to have an instant upgrade in the secondary. They drafted Kelvin Joseph in the 2nd round and Nashawn Wright in the 3rd, who I thought was one of the biggest reaches in the entire draft. So those are just a couple more huge risks. Trayvon Diggs has the ball skills, but a lot of other issues surrounding the technique of his game. I don't see that having significant improvement this season because they didn't really invest best in the position. And if those linebackers who aren't great in coverage don't stay healthy, then this quote unquote strength of their defense is going to go away too. So that'll put a lot of pressure on their offense to be putting up 5 touchdowns a night.
It's a very good point. Their offense is pretty lethal. I mean, but then again, their defense has to at least keep them in games. Obviously, a big test in week 1 against the Buccaneers. But let's get in lastly, before we leave the NFC East, let's get into the predictions of the division. You can say records if you want. I personally have records. I have the Dallas Cowboys winning the division as the 4 seed in the playoffs, going 10-7, 3-3 in division. Washington football team finishes in second place, 9-8, 3-3 in division. Giants finish in third, 7-10, 4-2 in division. And the Eagles finish 6-11 at 2-4 in the division.
Yeah, I actually have the same order, except I have the Giants and Eagles tied for third. I have Dallas 10-7, I have Washington 9-8, and then I have the Giants and Eagles both 5-12.
So mine's a little different. I don't know if this puts a smile on Swick's face or makes him even more mad. But I really think, I've been trying to tell him, I really think the Giants have the capability and will win the division. I think that they will have a really close to the same record with Dallas. It will probably come down the last few games like it always does every year with Dallas. And Dallas finds a way to choke most of the time. But I really think with the weapons that they're adding, I think Daniel Jones takes a huge step. The defense, it keeps getting better. You got the back end. And I did see improvement on the offensive line at the end of last year. Yes, they lost a big piece, and it's been looking a little kind of worrisome in the preseason, but it is preseason. I really think they take the huge step. And you got Saquon coming back, which is going to be huge relief for Daniel Jones. And then he can run a lot of bootleg play actions for all those weapons for you guys. And I really think that they will win the division. Then got Dallas, Washington, and Philly rounding it out.
Nice. So we all got Philly in last. Washington ends up going into third place in yours, which is a little bit surprising, but I could see it. Like, I'm not a believer in Ryan Fitzpatrick, and I don't think anyone else is here on the show. So let's take a look at the Atlanta Falcons, who oddly enough is the first opponent on the schedule of the Philadelphia Eagles. So you mentioned not being able to cover tight ends. The Falcons got a good one in Kyle Pitts, and he's going to be around for a while. How do you guys feel about the Falcons? I'll go to you first, Nick. Obviously, you're playing them week 1. Do you have any fears, and what do you think they'll bring this season?
Well, I have a lot of fears in the fact that Arthur Smith's offense really used the tight end very well in a lot of play actions. And I think Kyle Pitts is just going to thrive in that system. It'd be perfect. And against the Eagles specifically, week 1 is going to be a huge matchup, nightmare. But our rush defense should be pretty solid for that week 1. But overall for the season, you know what you're going to get out of Matt Ryan. He's going to be very solid, top half quarterback. You still got Calvin Ridley, who showed to be a top 10 wide receiver at bare minimum last year when Julio went down. It's just obviously same old Falcons. The defense has always been a trouble for them. And they got good pieces. They like what A.J. Terrell did last year. They still have some young pieces. Deion Jones, if he's healthy, it's just overall their defense always lets them down at the end.
I think it's still going to be a problem for them. And I think Atlanta's in a weird spot because they were a bad team that didn't have a lot of cap space. And when they decided to keep Matt Ryan, that essentially locked them in where they have limited flexibility to improve the roster around him. I agree that he's a high floor player who still might have a little bit of ceiling at this point in his career with decent weapons. But the Falcons offensive line, I still have some big concerns about. They've reached for a couple guys over the years with especially the pick with Caleb McGarry and Chris Lindstrom. I don't really see that improving too much. And then defensively, AJ Terrell, I mean, you could make an argument that pick was a reach in the first round too, but he's one of the few players you can look at and say, at least he's young and talented, because outside of the Richie Grant pick in the second round, I don't really see anyone who can step in and has the upside to make a real impact right away. There's definitely some good pieces. Like, I think Kyle Pitts is going to be legit. And if I think Arthur Smith is smart enough to use him as the chess piece that he is, move him all over the offense, get him in motion, line him up everywhere. But it's not going to be enough to win them more than an extra game or so, because he doesn't play a quote unquote premium position.
They're an interesting team, that's for sure. I personally think they're buried in the bottom of that division, but that'll come later as I say my predictions here. But let's talk about the New Orleans Saints. Obviously, the Drew Brees era is over there. They decide to go to Jameis Winston. Michael Thomas out 6 weeks. That might alter your predictions a little bit. Marquez Callaway's looked pretty good in the preseason. Good rapport with Jameis Winston. But the Saints, they're weird. You don't know how to predict because Sean Payton's a phenomenal head coach, but I don't know how I feel about them yet. So, Nick, how do you feel about the Saints?
I actually am a big fan of the Saints. It's because I trust more Sean Payton and what he wants to do with the offense. And I really think what Jameis Winston brings is a big arm that I wouldn't say never had. It just kind of started deteriorating for Drew Brees. There was a lot of quick slants, screens, a lot of quick throws. But now you can stretch the floor with Jameis Winston, a lot of play action with Alvin Kamara because he'll do his thing. And you still got a really solid defense that no one really talks about. Very underrated top 10 defense that gets a lot of pressure up front with Marcus Davenport. You still got Cameron Jordan up there. And you still got very solid back end. You still got Marcus Williams and Marshawn Lattimore still holding the back end. So I still think it's a very good team that will be quiet. Yes, you don't have Michael Thomas and Smith at the beginning as weapons, but once they come back, I think they'll be fine personally.
Yeah, I do think the Saints are better than people give them credit for. And now I agree with pretty much all of that, actually. But the Saints actually have a pretty good offensive line as well that doesn't get talked about too much either. Ryan Ramczyk, I thought, is one of the best value offensive linemen in the NFL, getting picked at the end of the first round in his draft. And he's not the only one. But combine the weapons that the Saints have. And I think Marquez Callaway is one of the most underrated players in the NFL right now. I think he's going to really break out this year with or without Michael Thomas in the lineup. While Winston's not going to have quite as many targets to start the year, I do think he's a good breakout candidate or somebody who can kind of resurge a little bit in the aftermath of Drew Brees' retirement and his long career there. The defense is pretty solid, and the Saints did some pretty interesting salary cap gymnastics to retain themselves some flexibility in future years. I do think they're in better shape than people expect. Not saying one of the best team in the NFC or anything, but they're definitely a team with some upside.
I was a little bit shocked to see them pull the plug on Latavius Murray today, electing for a younger Tony Jones Jr. from the University of Notre Dame as their number 2 back behind Kamara. But last thought that I'll say on the Saints, Jameis Winston, I feel, is going to have a very, very solid year. I truly believe in that. I think him under Sean Payton makes a lot of sense, and I think he's going to have a big role on that team this season. I'll go out on a limb and say that Taysom Hill doesn't start a game at quarterback for the New Orleans Saints. I think that's how good Jameis Winston is going to be. And oddly enough, I'm going to give, Swig, you gave the shout out last year. You said Darnell Mooney on this episode last year. You said Darnell Mooney is going to be that breakout. I'm with you on Callaway there. And one of the predictions I hit late last year was Jameis Winston would throw a touchdown in that playoff game. And sure enough, he came off the bench and threw it. That's probably the most boldest one that happened. But anyway, let's get into the Carolina Panthers. I love the Carolina Panthers, and I mean I might be on an island here, but I truly love the Carolina Panthers. I'm curious to know what you guys think. Nick, how do you feel?
I mean, there's a lot to love about the Carolina Panthers. I mean, bringing Sam Darnold, who has all the talent, we're all hoping it was more the Jets than it was Sam. And I think that's what all we're expecting because Matt Rule is a great coach. And you got Joe Brady, who's a great offensive coordinator. We saw what he did with Joe Burrow. Had a very good year with Teddy Bridgewater that really no one noticed. But you still got Christian McCaffrey. You got weapons with DJ Moore. You still got Robbie Anderson. Then you drafted Terrace Marshall. They have a very good offense. It's their defense that is very young and kind of gave them troubles last year. But you did draft J.C. Horn, and you still got Dante Jackson. Really good outside corners for them. It's just their pressure wasn't there last year. You still got Brian Burns, but other than that, very limited. So I think that could be a problem for them. But overall, they would definitely take a lot of strides.
I think the Panthers have a ton of upside. I don't think they're there yet, but I do think they're building something that's going to be sustainable about a year or two down the line. I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about the Sam Darnold trade. I definitely see the upside there. I don't hate the Panthers taking a swing, but the fact that he's only locked in as their quarterback for 2 seasons gives them some flexibility if he does not work out, because the rest of the rosters, you already see that starting to take shape. Nick mentioned Joe Brady as the offensive coordinator. One of my favorite players in this entire draft. I know I mentioned it to both both of you guys, was Terrace Marshall, the wide receiver from LSU, who's going to be reunited with Brady. And I think he is going to have an instant impact. He was my wide receiver 4 coming in. I do think he'll do something right away. And obviously a fully healthy McCaffrey will have a huge impact if he can play more than the 2 or 3 games he did last season. Defensively, you see all the confidence that J.C. Horn brings from the corner spot with that first round pick. I do think that there's going to be some growing pains there, but he absolutely has the athleticism and then some of the mental ability that not everyone has in terms of confidence. And you combine that with the Hassan Reddick pickup, which I absolutely loved on a 1-year deal. I think that's low risk, high reward. You combine that with what Shaq Thompson can do lining up all over the field and the great rookie season Jeremy Chin had. I do think there's still some question marks, especially on defense, and the offensive line is frankly terrible. So I do think that will limit their ceiling a bit, but the rest of the roster, you do see a lot of talent there.
I love this team. They spent every single draft pick last season on defense, and what they do this year in the first round, they went with defense right there, J.C. Horn. So I love that pick a lot. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'm a big believer in the Panthers. You'll hear that in my record prediction. Let's get into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay Buccaneers have all 12 starters returning on both sides of the ball, 11 on each side. And they got Tom Brady. That's all I'm going to say on the Bucs. What do you guys think?
It's crazy how off season you can really grab not a big name players and still have a great off season. From winning a Super Bowl, it is virtually impossible to bring everybody back, and that's exactly what they did. And you got Tom Brady, you got all the running backs, all the weapons on the outside. And the tight end, great defense with Todd Bowles, loves to bring the pressure. They got it all. And everyone's returning. You just don't think that they'll miss a beat really for this season.
Yeah, I don't think there's really too much to say here. The Buccaneers had a great team, and they got to bring pretty much everybody back on both sides of the ball. So I think they're in really good shape to continue everything. I think the one pickup they made that'll make an impact is Giovanni Bernard. I think he's a good third down running back that'll help them in the pass game. Outside of that, they got the same team, and they'll be contenders.
Yeah, let's get into predictions. One more note on the Bucs is that everyone in their division, frankly, got a little bit worse. So that's where I'm starting at the top. Buccaneers 12-5, Panthers playoff team 10-7, Saints 9-8, Falcons 5-12. Swig.
I'll go Buccaneers 14-3, Saints 11-6, Panthers 7-10, Falcons 4-13.
I'm going to go with Tampa Bay winning the division. Then you got Saints will be eventually, for me, a wild card team. Then you got Panthers, a 7-win team, will show some strides, but won't be there yet. And then you finish off with the Falcons 5-win. We'll have some good games, but then collapse on others like normal.
Yeah, the Bucs are in great shape. Let's just get right over to the NFC North, and that's the division the Bears are in. We talked to them a lot last week, so we're not going to talk a lot about them today. Let's start at the bottom, where I think everybody will agree, where I have the Detroit Lions. How do you guys feel about the Lions? I know Dan Campbell's a big fiery guy, and there's a different culture change happening in Detroit. But, Nick, I'm curious your thoughts on the Detroit Lions this year.
They're going to have a lot of growing pains. I'm not really a talented team overall, but I think what Dan Campbell's going to bring is a very hard-nosed, hard defense, run the ball first type of offense. And honestly, that's what Jared Goff thrives in the best, run first, play action, a lot of dink and dunks, quick throws, comeback routes. He will work really well in the system. He just doesn't have enough talent around him to be able to do a good job. You have a really young defense. They're trying to get better overall. They added some good talent, but it's just not there yet.
No, the Lions are definitely rebuilding. And I definitely expect Dan Campbell to bring a lot of aggressiveness and kind of a fuck it, we're just going to do whatever we can mentality, which will be entertaining because this is the same guy who cut both of his kickers last week for a little bit. So I'm expecting a lot of fourth down aggressiveness because what do the Lions have to lose? I got to give their new front office some credit. They clearly showed some balls with trading Matthew Stafford so quickly after they took the job. I thought they got a pretty good return for him. Jared Goff is a perfectly serviceable placeholder for a couple of seasons, who might, if he does improve, kind of like Ryan Tannehill did in Tennessee, you can keep him around, but you also have the flexibility not to if you want to upgrade with a younger player. The Lions' offensive line is not quite as terrible as you would expect for a team that's going to be so bad. I like the Penei Sewell pick. They have Taylor Decker on the other side. The defense, I don't think is going to be very good. I think one of the main questions I have is going to be, is Jeff Okudah going to be able to improve after a bit of a rough rookie season for the 3rd overall pick?
One thing that I learned about the Lions earlier today actually was their training staff has been completely revamped, and there have been a lot of injuries, a lot of soft tissue injuries. That's something that DeAndre Swift is dealing with right now at groin, and it might have been reported to everybody, I'm not sure, but Jeff Okudah played through a torn hamstring last year torn groin last year and Matt Patricia kept him on the field, forcing him to play. So what does that tell you about Matt Patricia and everything that happened there? So I do expect a better season from Jeff Okudah, probably because he can move around for the first time in his NFL career. So that should help big time for them. But let's get into the Bears. We talked about him last week. It's all about when Justin Fields takes the field. And I know their defense is aging, and I don't like it at any bit. I do not like the Chicago Bears football team. I'm staying away from them. I honestly would not be shocked if I'm not going to say it. All right. Chicago Bears. Swig, what are your thoughts?
Well, this is your platform, our platform. Say whatever.
The Lions might jump them. Damn it. Is that what you want me to say?
Yes, it is. That makes for a good clickbait. But first of all, like I said, we have the Bears' 1st round pick. I hope that happens. I really, really hope that happens. The Bears, the longer they stick with Andy Dalton, the more of a transitional year this is going to end up being, which is why I hope he starts for a really long time. The Bears do have some decent pieces around him in terms of the skill position players. I do think Marquise Goodwin is going to be an underrated pickup for them. In addition to Robinson and Darnell Mooney still returning, I think he's an upgrade from what Anthony Miller has been able to provide for them, and he's gone now. The defense, the only way the Bears are going to realize any potential they might have for this season is that defense has to perform at the elite level they did in 2018, where their defense carried them to the 12-4 record and the playoff appearance. And I just don't see that happening. I do think moving on from Chuck Pagano as the defensive coordinator will help, but there's only so much Sean Desai has to work with because a lot of those core pieces are still there and they're all 3 years older, and that's not good for a lot of them. So I just don't really see too much upside there.
I mean, the only upside you can see is Justin Fields at that point, when he will come onto the field. For whatever reason, Matt Nagy said, I made a promise that I would start Andy Dalton, so I'm keeping that promise. And so, I mean, if he's okay with throwing him in there and taking a couple losses, then that's fine with him. But overall, the Bears, for their defense, it just keeps getting worse each and every year. And like you said, it's aging. And then now you're bringing this very young QB with a very good running game that no one talks about with David Montgomery. And that actually will help a lot for Justin Fields, which could cause a lot of play action bootlegs for him. He's still got solid weapons on the outside. They have pieces. It's just they're always been that middle of the road team the last few years. And I feel like that's where they're going to be again, around that 6 to 8 win team kind of range.
There was a report today from the Bears beat that they truly believe, the Bears beat writers, every single one of, I'm not going to say every single one of them. The majority of Bears beat writers believe that David Montgomery will rush for over 1,400 yards this season. And when I hear that, I personally think Aaron Hernandez has a better chance of catching an NFL touchdown pass this season. So I'm not buying it at all, but maybe some people will. But I mean, David Montgomery's a solid back, but we'll see where it goes from there. But the Vikings, I'm stoked about the Vikings. You get Anthony Barr back. You bring in Patrick Peterson to help the young corners and Cam Dantzler and among others on that side. And that's one thing that held them back last year. Their defense got exposed. I know they lost safety, but they also have they locked up Harrison Smith. The offense, I mean, Kirk Cousins is okay. He's enough to get them to a playoff spot, I believe.
Yeah, I think the Vikings have a lot of upside. I'm not entirely sure where their floor or their ceiling is because there's so many what ifs on the team. But if everything falls into place, they could be one of the better teams in the NFC and compete with, I think, the Packers to win the division. But if not, they could be down where Chicago and Detroit are, like they were last season. The floor, I do think, is decently low if everything falls apart here. You know, the Vikings should have a pretty good running game, obviously, with Dalvin Cook. The offensive line, I still have some questions about, but I like the Christian Darrisaw pick a lot in the first round. I think he will improve. The defense, I do think bringing back Everson Griffin is going to be a really, really nice addition for them because there wasn't too much of a pass rush last year. It's the secondary where I still have questions outside of Harrison Smith. Like I thought Cameron Dantzler was awesome in his second year, but we have to remember that this is a team that invested first round picks in Mike Hughes and Jeff Gladney, and Hughes has struggled pretty badly, and Gladney had a felony conviction, and he's not even on the team anymore. And Patrick Peterson is not the player he once was. So I do think there's some question marks on the back end. And we all know Aaron Rodgers at least is capable of picking that apart.
Yeah, I mean, their offense, you know what they're going to bring. I mean, Kirk Cousins will get the job done. I mean, he's very underrated to me. I think he does a very solid job. He got really good wide receiver with Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. They did lose Irv Smith Jr., which I think is actually a lot bigger loss than what people are going to bring. Very above average offensive line, right in the middle of the pack. You still got Dalvin Cook, one of the top 3 running backs in the league. I mean, you know what that offense is going to bring. It's just that defense, and which is very troubling to me is because Mike Zimmer is a defensive coach, and that defense has been holding them back for a few years. So to me, like Swig said, it's a very make or break season for me for the Vikings, especially for Mike Zimmer, because they could be really good with that 10, 11 win range all the way to Florida, like 6, 7 at the absolute worst. You just don't know.
I could see it. Let's look at the Packers, obviously last team in this division. A good team. I don't think any of us have them falling to the direction of where the Bears, Lions, and potentially Vikings will end up. I think they'll be sitting pretty atop the division. Matt LaFleur has been phenomenal in his tenure with Green Bay so far. I don't expect that to change at all.
I don't either, although there was a lot of drama in the offseason this year that we don't usually see out of Green Bay. I am curious to see if this is really Aaron Rodgers going to be his last season with the Packers. Him and Devontae Adams posted those last dance memes at the end of the offseason. So that's definitely some tabloid fodder for a couple months from now. But on the field, they definitely have a clear leg up on the rest of the division. Their offensive line, I do think will struggle a little bit just because they did lose Corey Linsley in free agency, but it's still one of the league's better offensive lines. I'd say top 12 to 15 range. They have all of their weapons back. I do really like the Amari Rodgers pick in the 3rd round. I think he's going to have an instant impact out of Clemson in the slot. And then the defense, I think that secondary is a little bit better than people give it credit for. We all know how great Jair Alexander is, but they also have some talented pieces in the front 7. I think there's room to improve for guys like Rashawn Gary or Darnell Savage. So I do think Green Bay is going to be the clear team to beat in that division.
Yeah, I mean, they're the top of the class. I mean, you got Aaron Rodgers. You can never count him out. I mean, he's the best, if not the best quarterback in the league. I mean, and Matt LaFleur is a very good coach that people don't give credit, even if he has Aaron Rodgers. And you still got a very solid running game with Aaron Jones. You got all the weapons, and then a very underrated defense with very good pass rushers. Just the only thing that always gives a question marks is their rush defense has always kept them back for the last few years and has always hurt them in the playoffs. But other than that, you know what they're going to be able to do, and they're going to be one of the top teams in the NFC.
Well, maybe David Montgomery can rush for 1,400 yards on that rush defense. But let's get into the NFC North predictions. At the top, I got the Packers as the best team in the NFC with a 12-5 record, 4-2 in division. Vikings finish as a 5 seed in the postseason, the top wild card spot, 11-5-1. Yes, I predicted the tie. Don't worry, he's heading in the AFC's direction. 4-2 in division. Bears 7-10, 2-4 in division. Lions 3-14, 2-4 in division.
Yeah, with the Packers, the only reason LaFleur doesn't get that much credit is because he had that field goal in the NFC Championship game. I think that knocked him down a few pegs reputation-wise. But outside of that, yeah, they'll be fine. Packers, I got 13-4. Vikings, I got 10-7. I also have them making the playoffs. I got the Bears at 6-11, and I got the Lions going 4-13.
Yeah, I mean, Packers are going to win the division for me. I got Vikings second. They'll be close to making the playoffs. I don't have them as a wild card team personally. I think they're going to be around that 8 to 9 win range. And then you got Bears, who I think will be at 6. And then you got Detroit Lions finishing with 3.
That sounds about right. Let's head to the North or the West, shall we? Let's head on over to the Arizona Cardinals. They are very interesting. You have Chandler Jones sort of in a dispute right now. You bring in J.J. Watt, and it amazed me the other day that I'm sitting here like, how is it that just a few years ago in the AFC South, you had both DeAndre Hopkins and J.J. Watt on the Houston Texans, and now they're both playing together. Best offensive player, best defensive player from that team now goes over to the Arizona Cardinals together, and I think they can make an impact this year. The Cardinals, Kyler Murray's going to take them as far as this team could go. They have a ton of offense. They have a ton of defense. And this division is honestly the most competitive division I've seen in the NFL in a very long time. Swig, what's your thoughts on the Cardinals?
I think for the second year in a row, it is the best division in football. This could go any combination with these 4 teams. I think there's just so much, so many things that could differentiate them or could keep them bunched together. The Cardinals, first you mentioned Watt and DeAndre Hopkins. Don't forget AJ Green, another veteran they brought in, James Conner. I thought they had kind of a weird free agency approach, but in terms of the Cardinals ceiling, it's just, there's 2 obvious questions. Two questions I'm going to combine into one. How far can Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury take them? Is this year the air raid finally takes off? We know they like to run all that 10 personnel with 4 wide receivers. I like the Rondale Moore pick a lot. I think he's going to be a perfect fit there. And I do think the 2-headed running game will help. Defensively, I'm really curious to see how Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons fit well together. They drafted a linebacker first round 2 years in a row. They did lose Peterson and Hassan Reddick, but Chandler Jones is going to come back healthy. It's like you could see them winning anywhere, I think, from 7 to like 13 games. It's just they're a really hard team to peg.
Yeah, I'm actually really high on the Arizona Cardinals. I think this is where Kyler Murray makes a huge leap. I mean, he's already keeps getting better. I mean, you got all the weapons around him. You got AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins, Chase Edmonds, Jim Connor, and then a really breakout guy I think will actually have a very solid season is Rondale Moore. He's drafted from Purdue. I think he's going to have a very solid year with them. Then you got their defense. I think they have a very solid linebacker core with Jordan Hicks, Isaiah Simmons, Xavier Collins. You got J.J. Watt pass rushing with Chandler Jones. And then you got a young but solid secondary with Byron Murphy Jr. and one of the best safeties in Budda Baker. They have the talent, and I think this is really when they make the big step forward because they did show a lot of progress from last year.
Let's talk about the Seahawks. The Seahawks, I mean, they've controlled this division for a long time. It's been in their possession many years over the last decade or so. Where they've beaten up on everybody, but now they really have to put up if they want to stick. So I think the Seahawks are a very interesting team. I think without question, we could say the best quarterback in the division goes in their favor. And you could probably say the best head coach in the division, obviously one with the Super Bowl ring, goes to them as well. So the Seahawks team, they do end up losing Shaquille Griffin at the cornerback position. How do you feel about the Seahawks, Nick?
I mean, every year I feel like the Seahawks, you just want to count them out. I always feel like there's always something there, but they prove time and time again with great coaching. Russell Wilson always shows up at the beginning of the year, kind of tails off at the end, but always shows up every year. You still got great weapons with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, a very solid running game that they can always have rotational pieces. What always holds them back is their offensive line, always ends up being very poor. And then their defense, you know what they're going to bring every year. I mean, they're not the Legion of Boom as what they once were, but they're very solid top half type of defense and has always got the job done for them and always put Russell Wilson in a very solid spot.
When I was researching or prepping for this Seahawks segment, I discovered that this is actually Pete Carroll's 12th year as the Seahawks coach, and all it did was make me feel really fucking old because I can remember him at USC. But the Seahawks are a team that, like, you think that they're finally going to have the wheels fall off for the last couple of seasons, and it just hasn't happened. So I don't think the wheels are going to fall off entirely this year either. But I do think there are a couple more cracks in the armor, possibly. I do still think that the weapons around. I really like that Dwayne Eskridge pick that the Seahawks made as well. I think he'll provide a little insurance in case Metcalf or Lockett get injured at some point this season. The running game, I am curious to see because Chris Carson and Rashad Penny both are injury prone, who have been in and out of the lineup, and you don't know what you can rely on them for, but they also have the upside to be a really good tandem. I did like the Gabe Jackson pickup that the Cardinals or the Seahawks made on the offensive line from Vegas. The defense, I do think, will regress just a little bit because in addition to that Shaquille Griffin loss, they also lost KJ Wright, who's been such a big piece for them for so many years. And I while he might not be what he once was, or he might get overshadowed by Bobby Wagner a little bit, he's still a vital piece in my mind.
He is. That's a good point. Let's talk 49ers now. 49ers, Kyle Shanahan, they were in a Super Bowl a few years ago. They drafted their future quarterback and Trey Lance atop the draft board, and they got Jimmy Garoppolo going there. So, I mean, this might be where if they end up making that switch to Trey Lance, he's going to have to win a lot of big games in his rookie year against a lot of big divisional opponents. So this has me a little bit nervous about the 49ers, but their defense is back and healthy.
Dude, the 49ers, I don't think it's going to be this year for them, but I think their upside for about 2 seasons from now is higher than just about any other team in the NFL. I think they have a fantastic play caller with Kyle Shanahan. I'm really, really excited to see that offense because they have the combination of protection, weapons, and creativity that could make them the most efficient offense in the NFL in a couple of seasons if Trey Lance recognizes the clear potential that he has. Defensively, I thought there were some encouraging signs. Like we finally got a healthy year from Jason Verrett, who hasn't been able to stay healthy for most of his career, unfortunately. I thought he had a really nice bounce back season on the back end. And if San Francisco can get Nick Bosa back healthy, the potential is just tantalizing for that team. Considering how tough their division is and how I don't think if they do start Garoppolo, he doesn't have the same upside as the rest of the quarterbacks in the division, that might limit them slightly. But even worst case scenario, this team is not going to be a pushover.
Went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. I mean, they still have a capable offense with Jimmy G regardless, even though they did draft and use all that draft capital on Trey Lance. I do see this more this season, though, as a kind of like Alex Smith with Patrick Mahomes. Not saying Trey Lance is Patrick Mahomes, but I think Trey Lance definitely needs a year to learn and really kind of learn the whole NFL system because he only played one game last year in an FCS school. And that's really the last time he played football. And I think he really needs time to develop. They're going to be a very solid team. I just don't think that they're there with Jimmy G.
I think the Rams are a solid team. And I think getting a veteran quarterback like Matthew Stafford, who has the ability to throw the football a lot further than Jared Goff can. So I think it's going to do wonders for this Rams team heading into this season. And right now on paper, I think the Rams are the best team in this division. They have the best defensive player in all of football. And their offense is pretty solid, even with the loss of the running back Cam Akers. Swig, how do you feel about the Rams?
Dude, the Rams are going all in. They're going balls to the wall with that Matthew Stafford move. They gave up a couple more first-round picks, which honestly, it kind of seems like the Rams are allergic to those anyway. But I do understand what they're doing. They wanted an upgrade at the quarterback spot, and if Stafford's healthy, he is absolutely an upgrade. And this is the best team he's ever played on. And the Lions definitely didn't put him in the best positions to succeed, but the Rams are definitely a better landing spot for him. The offense, I think, if he's healthy, will be one of the better ones in the NFL without question. Sean McVay can really unleash all the potential he has play calling wise, more vertical shot opportunities down the field. I do think defensively they will be good, but they might regress at least slightly from that first overall in points allowed because they did lose a couple of key pieces in the secondary with John Johnson and Troy Hill, and I did lose Michael Brockers as well on the interior. Not that he compares to Aaron Donald or anything, but still one of the best teams in the league, I think, but I don't expect that defense to be quite as elite.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of the Rams. I love what they got going on. I think Matthew Stafford is going to take a huge – I mean, he's already a top half quarterback, but he's going to be on a winning team. That's going to be huge for him. And with Sean McVay, he'll do great things for putting Matthew Stafford in great spots. My only concern is losing Cam Akers. I think that's a huge loss. I don't know what we can see out of Sony Michel. He's not a very good pass catcher, just a downhill runner. And Darrell Henderson is just a change of pace guy. And they don't really have a good running offense now, even though with a solid offensive line. And that's kind of what Matthew Stafford's had in his entire career.
Right.
So I think that's going to be very worrisome. Their defense, though, is going to be top half. You have the two best players on defense with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey.
That's a phenomenal point. Jalen Ramsey, too. You mentioned being allergic to first-round picks. They got away with highway robbery. They ended up getting Kaylavon Chason and Travis Etienne for Jalen Ramsey. So that's a freaking steal and a half for the Rams side. But I'm not salty about it. Let's get into the AFC and let's head to the East, where let's get into the Jets. Oh yeah, division predictions. Sorry. Division predictions for the NFC West. Rams atop the division as the 3 seed at 11-6, 3-3 in division. 49ers make the playoffs at 10-7, 4-2 in division. Seahawks also 10-7, but the reason they are not in is because they went 2-4 in division. Cardinals at 8-9, 3-3 in division.
Man, I think it's the toughest prediction division-wise to do because all 4 teams are so talented. I got the Rams 13-4. I'm not quite as concerned about the running game. I do think Darrell Henderson is a little bit better than people give him credit for. I think Michelle will compliment him. I don't think that Akers is still a big loss. He's still the best overall, but I don't see it being quite as catastrophic there. So I still think they'll be all right. This one was really, really hard, but I trust Seattle more than I trust Arizona at this point. So I'm going to go Seattle 11-6, Arizona 10-7, but I got both of them making the playoffs. And then San Francisco 8-9.
So I got Rams winning the division. Then I think it's a 3-team playoff division. You got Arizona for me with 11-6, Seahawks at 10-7 as the 3 teams coming out of that division making the playoffs. And I think the 49ers are going to be an 8-9 team, but I do think it's the best division in all of football. You can go either way with any of those teams.
Very hard to predict. One division that isn't hard to predict in the AFC is the AFC East. I think we can all agree that the Buffalo Bills will be in sole possession of that one, but obviously I'll get your opinion on that. But well, let's start with the New York Jets, obviously a team we cover on the show and a team that we voiced most of our opinions on last week. But I'm curious from an outside perspective. Nick, how do you feel about the Jets?
I mean, they're going to have a lot of growing pains this year. I mean, Zach Wilson definitely has the arm talent. He has, one of the best arms in the draft. But, I mean, they just don't have the talent. I mean, they got some good pieces. Corey Davis is going to be good. They drafted Michael Carter, who I think is going to have a very solid year. And then you got a good coach in Robert Saleh with a very young, inexperienced defense that they're going to have a lot of issues. I think they can probably steal a game or two throughout the season, but I think it's just about development and growth this year for them.
I think there's more of a foundation here than there's been in a long time for the Jets, but this is definitely not going to be their year yet. There's still way too many flaws on the roster. I think especially in the secondary with the cornerback spot, I think that's going to be a complete dumpster fire because the Jets did opt against making a big money pickup in free agency, and that's fine, but you're not going to expect any of these undrafted free agents to really step in and make a huge impact other than a negative one. Offensively, Zach Wilson's already gotten more talent put around him than Sam Darnold ever did. It's far from perfect, but Darnold was never put in a real position to succeed. It's the Jets were taking chances on guys like Demaryius Thomas at the end of his career, for example, rather than a more established younger guy in Corey Davis in free agency or the Elijah Moore pick in the second round, which I really, really loved. I think their running backs outside of Carter still need some work. I'm not huge on Ty Johnson or Tevin Coleman or anything, but Mekhi Becton and Elijah Vera Tucker, I think, is at least the start of a better offensive line. They're not there yet, but there's definitely more to be excited about than there has been in at least a decade.
Let's talk Dolphins. The Dolphins, I'll say this. I'll say this every single day. Tua Tagovailoa is the most overrated player in American sports. I'll say it right now. I do not like Tua Tagovailoa one bit. And that's why, I mean, the Dolphins have a solid team around him. Brian Flores, phenomenal head coach. The defense, very good. The weapons, I know him and Waddle will be nice because he throws slants and that's all Tua can do. But I do not like Tua Tagovailoa. I do like the Dolphins roster around him. But I'm curious what you guys think, because I think those were a little bit powerful words. We'll ask Swig first.
Well, I don't think you like green eggs and ham either. I think I understand some of the questions with him. Now, I'm a little biased being left-handed myself. I want him to succeed. I'll just put that out there. I do think he does have some limitations in terms of the deep ball. I don't think you're going to get too much vertical out of him, but that's not really the strength of his game. I thought Jalen Waddle, who he's played with before in college, was a great pick for them because he thrives in the short areas and then can make things happen after they catch. You surround him with guys like that, that's your best bet. But it's kind of a similar argument you got with a couple other teams where you're not entirely sold on them quarterback wise, and they have solid rosters outside of that. We mentioned it with the Giants in Washington earlier. I think we're going to get to it with Denver later. I see a similar vibe there. I like a lot about this team. I think they have one of the best secondaries in the NFL. I mean, that corner tandem of Xavier Howard and Byron Jones is, I'd say, the best in the league. And the offensive line, I still think is decent. Like, I'm not big on Austin Jackson at the left tackle spot, but yeah, I don't think he's the most overrated player in North American sports, but I do think he has limited upside.
So I might be a little biased on Tua. I'm from Alabama, so roll tide. But no, I think Tua does have his limitations overall. I think they did add some weapons with Jalen Waddle. I think they got a good deep threat with Will Fuller if he stays healthy. I think Tua's biggest problem last year was he had that really good game in Arizona and said everything looked kind of too easy. And then the wheel spell off last year. But, I mean, you got a great defense, a great head coach in Brian Flores. He's going to put them in good spots. So I think Tua, all he's got to do is just not turn the ball over and let the defense play. And that's going to give them a good amount of wins. I don't know if they'll get them to that playoff spot, but they're going to be on that border again. So hopefully he can make the strides when he needs to make the plays when needed the most.
So from one Alabama quarterback to the other, Mac Jones, they're actually playing each other week 1, which is crazy. The New England Patriots, they were unconventional in the offseason, and they broke out their checkbooks for the first time with Bill Belichick as the head coach, and they decided to sign everybody. They signed multiple tight ends, insert joke here. And you look at Mac Jones and the way that they go. I mean, it was odd that they cut Cam Newton, but now they decide, we're going to go ahead and give the keys to Mac Jones. So I think it's a nice move because it fits their offense and what they did under Bill Belichick for many years now. But I'm kind of bullish on the Patriots because I think they're not back, but they're good.
Yeah, great words. I think the Patriots are in pretty solid shape here. It was kind of jarring to see them be so ultra aggressive in free agency for the first time pretty much ever. We haven't really seen that before, but I think some of that was necessitated by the catastrophic 1-year gap from the playoffs that they haven't had in a really long time. Mac Jones, I do think also has limitations as a quarterback, but I do think New England was the perfect landing spot for him because where he thrives the most in my mind is the mental processing side of the quarterback position. He can absolutely read defenses, look at coverages, make the right reads, check down, go through progressions, all that. And that mental intricacy, that ability is key to succeeding in a Bill Belichick offense, which is kind of galaxy braining over everyone else for 2 decades now. And I do think he has the capability to fit within that. The weapons around him, I think, are improved. I expect to see a lot of 12 personnel from them, considering they brought in both Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry. They were not brought in to be decoys. So I expect it to be an offense that doesn't get too much production out of the wide receiver position again, but there is some talent with a pretty good offensive line, some very well-rounded running game kind of by committee, and then a quarterback who I think will have some growing pains, but will get better as the season goes along to go with the front 7 that is absolutely loaded and a defense that is getting a lot of players who opted out back.
Yeah, I think that's actually a huge thing for them, is all those players coming from COVID. They actually probably got hurt the most out of any team. A lot of those players on defense stepped out. Now they're returning. So you got that who already is a solid defense to begin with. And then you got Mac Jones, who I think, like you said, very good with the mental processes. But, I mean, he won't turn the ball over, and they're just going to run the football with Damian Harris. They got the 2 tight ends, not the same as Gronk and Hernandez, obviously, but they want to get that style of play back. And they added Nelson Aguilar, which I think is a good deep threat that will help them out. And overall, I don't think that they're back, like you said. They're going to be a good team that will be in games with most of the teams, but I just don't think they end up winning. I think they're going to be a 500 team.
Let's look at the Bills. The Bills obviously are a team that a lot of people like in this division, and rightfully so. They danced their way all the way to a pretty deep playoff run last season. Josh Allen got a fat contract, and they built the team around them. I think now this might be a bold prediction. You know what? It is bold, and I'm ready to make it bolder. I'm going to say Zach Moss rushes for 1,000 yards this season.
Yeah, that is bold because I think the Bills, they have that running back by committee approach again because they still have Devin Singletary. And then they brought in Matt Breida, I believe it was as well. So if all three of them are going to be splitting touches, it's going to be difficult for any of them to get that far because I think they're all going to be used in complementary roles. But I think he has more upside to get to 1,000 yards as a runner than Singletary or Breida does at this point in their careers. But let's call it like it is here. The Bills are the clear favorite in this division. It is theirs to lose, especially if Josh Allen stays healthy. They have the weapons. They have the protection up front. They have the options at running game, kind of like the Patriots do, a three-headed attack. Their defense, while it wasn't quite as stout as it was last year, similar to the Rams, I do think the talent is there for them to bounce back. They've managed the salary cap really well, and they have impact players at all three levels of the defense. We know what Tremaine Edmonds can do. We know what Matt Milano can do, what Tre'Davious White can do. And then apparently AJ Epinesa has been really, really good in the preseason training camp this year. And I wasn't big on that pick, but if he proves me wrong, that'll only help them more. They still have Ed Oliver, who was drafted in the top 10 a couple of years ago. And then the Bills tried to shore up their pass rush by taking two pass rushers in the first 2 rounds this year. That could only increase the upside there if they can get to the quarterback. So if they lose this division, it's on them. They have more talent than anyone else.
Yeah, I think Sean McDermott has done a great job with this team, getting better each and every year. I mean, Josh Allen taking a leap every year, and it's been amazing to watch. My only concern is that running game. I mean, made that bold prediction. It's just running back by committee, and it's never shown to be there each game. They've always been very pass heavy, and it actually come back to bite them. But what I love most is drafting those 2 pass rushers. I mean, what you saw in the AFC Championship game was Patrick Mahomes had all day. He had all day to sit back there and throw it to whoever he wants, which you can have a great secondary. But if you can't get to that quarterback, you're going to have blown coverages at some point. And drafting those 2, I think, is going to be a huge help. And they're going to be the cream of the crop of the AFC East, the top 3 teams in the AFC as well.
Yeah, I actually have them. Let's get into our predictions. I actually have them as the 4 seed in the AFC. They go 11-6, 5-1 in division. So they dominate their division pretty handedly. Got the Patriots as a 6th seed as a wild card at 9-8. They go 4-2 in division. The Dolphins finish 7-10, 3-3. Jets go 4-13, 1-5.
Yeah, I'm a little bit higher on the Bills. I really think they'll be good. I'm going to go 13-4 for them. I got the Patriots sneaking into the playoffs 10-7. The Dolphins just missing it again at 8-9, and then I got the Jets going 3-14 because they're going to get beat up by those other 3.
Yeah, I think Bills are going to have a 13-win season, kind of coast through the AFC East. I mean, each team is going to be better. You got the Dolphins and Patriots for me tied with 9-8, and then you finish off with the Jets with the 3-14 season.
Pretty solid. Let's head to the South, where the Houston Texans are right now, and they named Tyrod Taylor their starting quarterback. And with that, that's all I need to say. The Texans are going to suck this season. Swig?
Tyrod Taylor, come on, man. Let's not be disrespectful here. He had a punctured lung last year, but yeah, I get it. I do think they cleaned house, and then there's the Deshaun Watson legal drama hanging over their whole offseason around one of the least talented rosters in the league because they don't have any draft capital because of some very weird Bill O'Brien shit that is still hanging over the head of the Houston Texans right now. So I do think their running game might not be quite as terrible as people think with David Johnson and Mark Ingram. They might be able to steal a win once or twice. There's not no talent. Offensive line isn't horrible with Laramie Tunsil. They're going to suck, though.
I guess the only positive side for me is I drafted Brandon Cooks in my fantasy team. He's the only wide receiver they got. So that's all I'm hoping for the Texans. Overall, I think, the roster's one of, if not the worst. Tyrod Taylor, you know what you're going to get out of him. They're just going to run the football a lot. They have a good running back by committee. But other than that, they're going to be very, very bad.
They have a weird running back room. Everyone's a veteran there. They got Rex Burkhead, Phillip Lindsay to go along with Mark Ingram, David Johnson. It's a disaster. But I'll give one bold take. I know I've given a few here. Nico Collins is the player to watch. I think he really steps up for this Texans team and becomes a pretty solid wide receiver. Well, let's head to my team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And obviously a new regime there, new quarterback, new head coach. It's going to be telling the first 5 or so weeks on what football team this is. If they lose a lot of games, I mean, they open the season against Houston, they play Denver, they play Cincinnati, all in the first 4. They play Arizona as well. But that's 3 out of 4, I'd say, toss up to favorable matchups for Jacksonville. And the start of the schedule is easy. The middle to end of the schedule is an absolute nightmare. So if the Jags are going to win a lot of games, it's going to come early in the year. I do like this football team from a fan standpoint. I think they see improvement, but they're not going to do anything spectacular this season.
Well, can we talk about the best draft pick in the history of the franchise with Travis Etienne real quick?
Yeah, I'm pissed. If not, go check my TikTok. I think it's a 26K where I bust a vein as I scream about Travis Etienne.
Yeah, if I think you got too intense, man, that's something else, because you guys know me well enough where I probably have cardiac events whenever I watch the Giants play. The Jaguars do have some talent. I'm pretty I'll say intrigued by the Trent Baalke and Urban Meyer hirings in the front office and the coaching staff, because frankly, I think Baalke really fucked up in San Francisco a few years back, made some very questionable moves that helped end the really well-established foundation they had there about a decade ago. It's led to an up and down decade since that. I still think San Francisco's got a bright future now, but it took them some time to get away from that. And Urban Meyer has kind of left both Florida and Ohio State under weird circumstances, and I think then him all of a sudden reappearing in the NFL is a huge swing. But Trevor Lawrence, I think, is going to have an instant impact. He's going to be solid. I don't think he's going to be spectacular, especially because that schedule gets harder at the end of the year. But the Jaguars were aggressive. I like the Shaquille Griffin pickup a lot. They do still have a ways to go, I think. But if they can get a couple wins at the beginning of the season, they should at least finish third in that division.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be third, but I honestly really like what the Jags have brought. I mean, I think Urban Meyer is going to put Trevor Lawrence in the perfect position for him, and he'll excel exactly how Urban wants it. You got DJ Chark, who I think is a very good wide receiver coming off injury. I think he finally gets a quarterback that can actually throw him the ball. You got Marvin Jones, very reliable wide receiver. And, I mean, James Robinson, I mean, he had a very good year last year. I think that offense is very capable of keeping up. I just don't think the defense can hold them, so they're going to play behind a lot. So I don't think that they'll generate a lot of wins, but I think they can definitely be competitive in a lot of those and show a lot of promise.
They did switch to a 3-4 defense on that side, and they brought over a few names from the offensive side. They brought in Darrell Bevel as their offensive coordinator, which understands why Jamal Agnew and Marvin Jones followed suit from their tenure in Detroit. I do think Laviska Shenault's an intriguing weapon here with the loss of Travis Etienne. He can run the ball. We saw him get a few carries last year. He's very physical after the catch, so I think he could have a big impact. But let's look at the Colts. Obviously, Nick, Carson Wentz finds a new home, and by God, I think he's going to step on the field week 1. How do you feel about the Colts this season, and also Carson Wentz?
I think they're going to have a really good year. I mean, what the difference about this team with the Colts than will be with the Eagles, Carson Wentz was asked to pretty much do everything last year. You saw, I mean, he was trying to make a play out of nothing, which caused a lot of turnovers and made him look really bad last year. I think with all the running backs they got, Frank Reich will put him in a good system. And, I mean, obviously, he had the MVP system with Reich. And you got a top 10 defense that is very good. And all he has to do is just not turn the ball over and stay healthy. I mean, that's obviously the two biggest question marks for Carson Wentz. And if he can play the full 16 games, I don't see why they cannot win that division.
I think they have the upside too, because there's a lot of reasons for optimism with Indy. They have a fantastic offensive line, a strong defense, and maybe the best or most well-rounded running back core in the league, because you got guys with a bunch of different skill sets there who can play in any game situation. Jonathan Taylor could absolutely break out as a full-time running back this year. I really, really like Nyheim Hines. I'm curious to see what role Marlon Mack has coming off of his injury, but ton of talent there, and you got the protection for the quarterback. that frankly Andrew Luck didn't have while he was playing. And that's definitely only going to help Carson Wentz, who wasn't the same last season, but we've seen how good he can be, especially in that 2017 season. While I don't know, I don't think I'm going to say he can get all the way back there in one off season. I think he can get pretty close. And if he's an above average quarterback, the Colts, the sky is pretty much the limit there. On defense, the one question I would have a little bit is the pass rush. They did lose Danico Autry. Kwity Paye is definitely got some talent, but he's also a bit of a project and a bit developmental just because of how freakishly raw and athletic he is. Deo Odeyingbo is kind of going to have a red shirt year this year, so they might have a little bit of pressure generating or rushing the quarterback outside of DeForest Buckner. Outside of that, though, I think this is one of the deepest and most well-rounded rosters in the league.
I like them, but their corners are toasters. I think they get burned on every single play. Rock Ya-Sin, he yucks. Yuck. I'm not a big fan of him. He always gets burnt. But let's head to Tennessee with weapons that can burn Rock Ya-Sin. Both A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, a pretty lethal combo there. You have Derrick Henry. This is probably one of the best on paper teams I have seen offensively in a very long time, where you load up Madden and you run out there with the Tennessee Titans because they look fun. So a lot of weapons there. Swig, how do you feel about the Titans?
They absolutely have the potential to repeat as division champs. Ryan Tannehill's kind of had a career resurgence in Tennessee, but I think a big question mark is that he started that resurgence with Arthur Smith calling the plays, and he's gone now. So I am curious to see how much of an impact that has. Tennessee, I thought, had a very active offseason. If nothing else, they lost a couple of guys on the offensive line. Then, of course, they went out and traded for Julio Jones. They're going to pair him across from A.J. Brown at wide receiver. Derrick Henry's back. So they definitely, but they did lose Jonnu Smith. So I do think it's a little top heavy skill position wise, not a lot of depth there. Defensively, they did end up losing Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson, Kenny Vaccaro. They took a couple of swings to try to replace him with the Caleb Farley pick and bringing in Janoris Jenkins, who's older, but he's still a solid corner, I think. They definitely have the talent, but I don't think they have quite the same upside that they did last year. But at the very least, I still think this is a playoff team.
Yeah, I think it's a playoff team as well, and they'll fight with the Colts to get to win that division. But I mean, I just think what's going to hold them back is that defense. Overall, I think that defense has a lot of issues, showed a lot of issues last year, and I thought they actually just got worse. Yes, they added Julio Jones, which is a huge upgrade, and that offense is terrifying because you don't know who's going to get the ball, and you can't double cover everyone. But I mean, that defense is going to really push other teams, help them get wins.
Yeah. AFC South predictions. I got the Titans as a 3 seed in the AFC South, 11-6, Colts 9-8, Jaguars 7-10. So I have the Colts 2 wins less than Tennessee, 2 better than Jacksonville. Tennessee finishes 3-14.
Oh, you meant Houston finishes 3-14.
Yes, my apologies.
Gotcha. No, you're good. I'm gonna go. I got the Colts winning the division. I got them going 12-5. Tennessee, the only 10 I see is the 10 in their record. They're gonna go 10-7. I know.
Jeez.
I'll see myself out now. I got the Jaguars going 6-11, and I got Houston going 4-13.
Yeah, so I got Indy winning the division as well, and then I got Tennessee. They'll make a wild card spot. I got Jacksonville third, and then you got Texans hopefully winning 3 games at best.
Perfect. Let's head to the North, where we will talk about the Cincinnati Bengals. And another pick I was pissed about on draft day was Jamar Chase. And I know you could say weapons. They're killing Joe Burrow the same way they killed Carson Palmer. I think he's just going to be absolutely buried. He's going to be picking stuff out of his face mask, coming off an ACL. Not good at all. Not good at all. Their offensive line is atrocious. They should have upgraded it instead. They already have a great receiving core with Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, so why not add another one? I mean, I'm pissed at Cincinnati. I don't think they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Well, passing on Penei Sewell in the first round was one thing. The fact that they took Jackson Carman in the second round, I still can't wrap my head around that. And apparently he's he came into camp out of shape, and he's going to start the season on the bench. And the only guy the Bengals brought in who might be able to be a stopgap on the line is Riley Rife, who's been fine for Minnesota for most of his career. But that's about it. I do worry about the offensive line for them a lot. I think Joe Mixon will be decent, but I think he's going to have more of an impact as as a wide receiver with Giovanni Bernard gone and an offensive line that can't run block too well. How much can he really do between the tackles? Nothing personal there. Defensively, they had an interesting a couple of lateral moves in kind of where they replaced Carl Lawson with Trey Hendrickson, and they replaced William Jackson with Awuzie from Dallas. They still have Jesse Bates, the all-pro on the back end, who's one of the most underrated players in football, but there's still a ton of question marks. And also, what version of Joe Burrow are we getting?
Yeah, I mean, the way that Jamar Chase looks, I think Penei Sewell can drop as many passes as Jamar Chase has done this preseason. But I mean, overall, I was upset as you are. I mean, Penei Sewell, they really need to shore up the offensive line. I mean, that is your number one pick, and you just got torn ACL. Now you get more weapons. Yes, he went to LSU. I just didn't think it was the right fit. But I mean, they have all the weapons. They have the talent on offense. Just their defense is going to be really behind. Jesse Bates, really great player. But other than that, they just have a solid up front, but they're usually going to be behind in most games. They're going to have to pass a lot.
Baltimore is next. And Baltimore, they signed Le'Veon Bell, obviously with the injury to J.K. Dobbins and Justice Hill. One name to watch out for, I'll give it to you right now, Tyson Williams. He might take over that backfield. I think he is absolutely legit if given the opportunity, but I'm not high on the Ravens this year. I think their defense is aging. They try the carousel of wide receivers every year, whether it's a Willie Snead or now it's a Sammy Watkins. They just throw names and hope they stick up to go along with the bust and Marquise Brown. And then you draft a Rashad Bateman, but he's already out. So I don't see this as a good year for the Ravens. What do you guys think?
Yeah, so I like the Ravens personally in this division. I think Lamar Jackson keeps getting better as a passer. I know Sammy Watkins never stays healthy, but they're adding weapons, and I think that's a huge sign. Yes, they also lost J.K. Dobbins, but that running game is going to be one of the best. I mean, with Lamar Jackson running the ball and all the read options, triple options they do, RPOs, is really tough to cover at all times. And the defense, one of the best ones. Yes, it's aging, but that secondary, Jimmy Smith, Marlon Humphrey, and the last one, help me out.
Marcus Peters.
Marcus Peters, thank you. Sorry, I couldn't think of the other one. But I mean, their secondary is top notch. And you still get a very solid, older front seven, but Patrick Queen drafted. They really have some good players back there. I think they're going to be the best team in the AFC North, personally.
The Ravens have been consistently good for a while, but the last few years they haven't been able to get over the hump in the playoffs. They might win one playoff game. I think they've actually won one playoff game in the last 5 or 6 seasons. That game over the Titans earlier this year. So they've been consistently good, but they just haven't been able to get pushed into, say, the conference championship or anything. And I don't think I see that kind of upside for this team either. Losing J.K. Dobbins is going to make an impact. I still think they'll be okay considering their scheme and the rushing threat that their quarterback provides. And even if Tyler Huntley ends up having to play, he does have that same running ability at least. So that should be something that they can fall back on. Defensively, while that secondary is really, really good, they did lose a decent amount in the front seven with Matthew Judon going to New England. I think we forgot to mention him earlier. And Yannick Ngakoue going to the Raiders after the Ravens made that splashy move in the offseason or in mid-season last year. So I do think that they're going to struggle a little bit to generate some pressure on the quarterback. I still think they're a good team. I don't see a huge amount of upside for them because they do have some pretty difficult flaws to overcome.
The Steelers also have some flaws. Let's get into them. Najee Harris, obviously a back there who finally gets a workload for the I shouldn't say first time in his career. He got pretty solid workload in his last year at Alabama, but he's a solid running back, comes into a system, but the offensive line scares me. How do you guys feel about Pittsburgh?
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Pittsburgh at all. I think Ben Roethlisberger keeps showing his age each and every year. It's gotten worse. And honestly, James Conner is a solid running back, and you just replace him in the first round with Najee Harris with a very poor offensive line. I don't think that helps anything. I think you're just staying stagnant at that point. Wide receivers are okay. I mean, Juju Smith's not a number one. Neither is Johnson and neither is James Washington. They're good, but they're nothing great. And then their defense, very good. That will keep them in games. But I just think that offense is going to hold him back, and Ben Roethlisberger is going to have some turnovers because he still thinks he's the same gunslinger he was 5, 6, 7 years ago.
In some ways, the Steelers to me are kind of like the Seahawks of the AFC, where we think that there's going to be a year where the things finally start to fall apart for them, and that doesn't really happen. Like the year that Roethlisberger was hurt, the Steelers weren't very good, but outside of that, they've still been the pretty high floor team they've been for most of our lives now. But I do think that they're going to fall back a little bit this year. I think they have some limitations offensively because we all agree that offensive line is kind of terrible, and losing Alejandro Villanueva to Baltimore, no less, is not going to help them with that. Najee Harris, like, is as talented as he is, like any other running back, he can only do so much without good blocking. He's going to make some plays. The weapons are decent. Like Chase Claypool obviously had a great rookie year, and you add them to Smith-Schuster, who is still talented, and Deontay Johnson. I see something there, I guess. I do think Pat Freiermuth is going to be an interesting addition for them in the second round. Defensively, they'll be good, but they did lose Bud Dupree to Tennessee. They lost Hilton and Steven Nelson at the corner spots. So I think that'll be more of a middle of the pack defense rather than an upper echelon one. And that distinction is going to cost them a couple of games because I don't think they have the offense to make up for it.
Mike Tomlin has never been under 500 during his tenure at Pittsburgh. So that's something to keep an eye on. Cleveland Browns, I'll say it right here. Outside of Kansas City, and I'd almost put them, I'll say that the Cleveland Browns are the best complete team on paper right now heading into the season. I love this football team.
Yeah, I mean, on paper, they're the best, one of, if not the best team. Sorry, Swig. But I mean, they got all the talent in the world. But I mean, it's one of those things with the Browns. It's like, is this the year they can win the division? You have to show me before I believe it, like want to believe it. But I mean, Baker Mayfield keeps showing strides. I mean, he got the great running game with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb. I mean, don't ask Baker to do too much. Odell Beckham will be coming back, which shown through the stats, Baker's actually worse with Odell, but I mean, it's Odell Beckham. He's a great player. Adding him will be helpful. Then you got a very good, young, talented defense, adding Jadeveon Clowney, even though he didn't do anything for Tennessee, still helping out Myles Garrett. And then you added Jeremiah Losu for Notre Dame's a huge upgrade, and Greg Newsome on the first round pick as well. I think they kept adding talent on the defensive side, and I think they're going to be close to winning that division.
Dude, this is one of the deepest and most well-rounded rosters in football. I really, really like it. And I think last year was the year where they could finally kind of shed that laughingstock label they've had so long. It's clear that they have a good foundation. I thought Kevin Stefanski was phenomenal in his first year as the head coach for the Browns, and I only expect that to continue. The tight ends, which he loves to use so much, are really strong with Austin Hooper there as well as Njoku and Bryant as well. So they have the weapons. If Odell Beckham can come back healthy, that will only help them if he can develop that chemistry, because he hasn't been able to stay on the field too much in Cleveland. But Jarvis Landry is still there. They have one of the league's best offensive lines. And then defensively, where I think they had some of their bigger concerns, they get Greg Newsome, who I absolutely love, in the first round at number 26 across from Denzel Ward. They bring in John Johnson to shore up the safety spot and Troy Hill in the slot. They brought in Clowney and Tack McKinley to take a little bit of pressure off Myles Garrett on the other side. The upside is there. And then, like you mentioned, Owusu Koromoa in the second round. I think there's a ton to like about this team. Very well-rounded, very few weak spots. I really do think they're I'll go top 3 teams in the AFC along with Kansas City and Buffalo.
Well, let's get into the predictions. I actually have them as the number 2 seed in the postseason. The Browns atop the division, 12-4-1. That's the tie with Minnesota. If you could pick 2 teams to tie, try picking Cleveland, Minnesota. 3-3 in division. Steelers 10-7, 4-2 in division. Ravens, shoot me here, 8-9, 3-3 in division. Bengals 5-12, 2-4 in division.
I'm going to go. I got the Browns winning the division at 12-5. If you're going to pick two teams to tie, I think it should be Cincinnati and Philadelphia, by the way, because they've done it twice
Yeah.
already. But they don't play it for another 4 years. After the Browns, I got the Ravens finishing second at 10-7. I do trust them still a little bit more than Pittsburgh right now. I got Pittsburgh finishing 8-9. So Mike Tomlin will know what it's like to have a losing record. So I hope he's watching this right now. And then I got Cincinnati 4-13 because that offensive line is just going to destroy them. If I'm going to say it about the Giants, I'll say it about other teams too.
Yeah, so I think Ravens will win the division. I think they're a very good regular season team, as they've shown. Obviously, they fall to the playoffs. They'll be 12-5. I got the Browns 11-6 will be my 5 seed, number 1 wild card team. Got the Steelers at 9-8, and then I got the Bengals at 5 and what is that 12?
Final division. Let's dive right into it with the AFC West. Let's start with the Raiders. The Raiders, I think, are a good team to start with. Obviously, they've John Gruden. It's starting to get vanilla, I think. Start good in the first half, end poorly. It's year after year with this football team. That's sort of my thought process on it. I'm interested to see what they do in the backfield. They bring in a Kenyon Drake. Kind of interesting there. How do you feel about the Raiders? We'll start with Slick.
The Raiders are fucking weird, man. That's how I feel about them. The pressure, I think, is clearly mounting on John Gruden and Mike Mayock at this point because they've had some pretty horrendous picks so far in their tenures with the team. And I think this is going into the 3rd or 4th season. Can't remember which. It looked like for a minute they might make Derek Carr the scapegoat, which would have been unfair, but he's still around. I still think he's a solid quarterback. He played pretty well last season, all things considered. The offensive line, like they did take Alex Leatherwood in the first round. I thought that might have been a reach, but he'll at least help shore up an area of need because they did lose Gabe Jackson and Rodney Hudson in the offseason, which will definitely help regress one of their better units. Jacobs and Kenyon Drake is a pretty good combination, but you have to see, is Henry Ruggs going to improve on the outside? Yeah. And defensively might be even worse. Like I like the KJ Wright and Yannick Ngakoue signings, but and I did like the Trayvon Merrick pick a lot in the 2nd round, but outside of that, that defense is atrocious.
Yeah, I kind of showed last year against the Dolphins when Ryan Fitzpatrick got that face mask pulled and they went
perfect.
Yeah. But I mean, Raiders are a weird team to me. I mean, like at the first half of the season, they look like they finally could be that playoff team. I mean, their offense is always really good. It's always that defense that keeps holding them back. And they keep kind of like the Falcons blowing leads. And they keep finding ways to lose some way, somehow. You always think that this is the year that they step forward, but it's just the same 8-8, 7. Well, it'll be 7-10, 8-9, 9-8 kind of team that will hang around there and show some life sometimes, and then just be a doormat on other games. You just never know with the Raiders.
Now, what about the Broncos? The Broncos, I know a lot of people keep hitting my line saying, watch out for the Broncos. They got a nice trio on the outside with their 3 weapons of wide receivers of KJ Hamler and Cortland Sutton. And I'm drawing a blank on the other, Jerry Jeudy, the guy that dropped every pass known to man last year. But I mean, I look at this team and I see Javonte Williams poised to break out. If Melvin Gordon slips up at all, I think Javonte is going to take over that backfield. Their defense is nice. Not going to lie. I'm a big Vic Fangio guy. I love their defense. But I don't hate their quarterback, but Teddy Two Gloves. I mean, what are you going to get out of him? I don't like the Broncos. Simply put, I think they're a little bit overhyped.
Dude, they're, like I mentioned earlier, they're the Giants of the AFC. To me, there's a lot of similarities there. Like if they started Drew Lock, it would be just about identical because this is a Denver team that has a good defense and a much stronger secondary now that they went out and drafted Patrick Surtain and signed Kyle Fuller and Ronald Darby in free agency and got Justin Simmons locked up. So the defense is there. Offensively, they have weapons. Their offensive line, I'd say, is slightly better than the Giants, but not quite as good as Washington's because those are the 3 teams I think are really similar. But if I don't like one, I'm not going to like the others. So I don't see it. I don't see it either. I think Bridgewater, you're going to get serviceable play. You know what you're getting from him. He does, I think, have decent mental processing ability that I don't see out of Drew Lock. But I don't see much of a ceiling there either. And I don't care that the weapons are better if they don't have enough time to throw him the ball or a quarterback that can make enough plays down the field.
Yeah, I think Teddy Bridgewater showed last year kind of what his ceiling was. I mean, it was arguably his best season he's had. I mean, he has the weapons around him, very solid defense. He won't turn the ball over. You know what you're going to get. Average running game. I mean, I like Melvin Gordon. Javonte Williams is solid. Offensive line's poor. It's an average team to me because you just can't trust Teddy Bridgewater to get you over the hump. You know he's going to bring solid quarterback, kind of like the 49ers to me with Jimmy G. It's just a very solid team, good defense. You just don't have that quarterback to get you to the next level.
Yeah, I see that. And I also see a Chargers team who I believe is the second place team in this division. We'll get into that later. But I love the Chargers. I think that every year they get hurt. Every freaking year they get hurt. I mean, it never fails. You can go back 10 years and they're getting hurt. I mean, every single position, whether it's Danny Woodhead with a blown out knee, Keenan Allen with a lacerated spleen. I mean, every single year, Mike Williams with a shoulder. I mean, it never freaking fails with this Chargers team. Derwin James every year. But right now, this is the best time to be a Chargers fan because it's about to be week 1 and it seems like everybody's healthy. So if they can stay healthy, I think they're going to be a pretty solid team. I do like Jalen Palmer a lot, wide receiver. He is a sneaky player for them this season. But how do you guys feel about the Chargers?
I think they're going to be pretty solid. I agree. I think there's a ton of optimism because Justin Herbert stepped in and had a fantastic rookie season. And I think that's only going to continue with, I think, a better offensive line. I love that Corey Linsley pickup they got from the Packers. I think he's going to provide a lot more protection. And I also love the Rashawn Slater pick in the first round. So they did have some decent weapons already. Now they're starting to protect their quarterback, which the Bengals should really take note of doing, by the way. And then the defense, to me, that's the bigger question. Is just there are some talented guys there, but similar. I mentioned Jason Verrett earlier. I mean, Chargers fans will remember him because he wasn't able to stay healthy there very often. Derwin James is turning into him 2.0 in terms of great talent who hasn't been able to stay on the field so far. Joey Bosa missed most of last season as well. The Chargers did lose Melvin Ingram to Pittsburgh, but I do think there's some talent there. The offense to me should be one of the league's better ones already. I think it showed some good signs last season and it'll improve. And I think the defense will be middle of the pack, maybe better if they're able to stay healthier. The floor is decently high for this team, I think.
Yeah, I actually have them as my final wild card team in the AFC. I think the Chargers are going to take a huge step forward. I mean, Justin Herbert, I mean, no one saw it coming last year with the unfortunate happened with Tyrod Taylor, but he came in, balled out, and that offense, I mean, they have the talent. Keenan Allen was a top 5, top 10 wide receiver. Mike Williams, a great deep threat. And as long as Austin Eckler stays healthy, you got a very good running back that can get out of the backfield, very good downhill runner as well. And then you got a sneaky defense with very good pieces. And then now you bring in a head coach from Los Angeles Rams, from their defense coordinator, Brandon Staley. So I think he's going to implement a very good defense and then get them about middle of the pack, which really that's all they need to be with their offense to get them to that playoff spot.
I agree. I think that they're a solid team, and I like Austin Eckler a lot. I think if he could stay healthy, he could be another piece. It's a lot of ifs with the Chargers, especially on the health department. But let's talk about the Chiefs right now. And the Chiefs, they're the best team in the AFC, no question about it. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, as long as they're together, they're going to be Super Bowl contenders for the rest of the time.
Yeah, they'll be good. I don't think there's a ton to say here. Similar to the Buccaneers, they get to bring back everyone. The most notable thing they did, I think, was upgrade the offensive line with the Kyle Long and the Joe Thuney signings. And I like the Creed Humphrey draft pick a lot in the second round. Outside of that, they're running back essentially the same team on both sides of the ball. So if they can get some better play from the O-line, they'll absolutely be the team to beat on paper here. And on defense, I think one guy I want to mention real quick is I really like Willie Gay, the linebacker out of Mississippi State, and I think he's only going to get better as the season progresses. He's going to fly all over the field.
Yeah, I mean, they're the top team. You can argue the top team in the NFL, top team in the AFC. I mean, they're going to be the number 1 seed most likely as long as everyone stays healthy. I mean, they're going to be going for that third straight Super Bowl going to third straight Super Bowl. I mean, like you said, if you have Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, I mean, the sky's the limit. I mean, anything's possible.
Anything's possible. Let's get into the picks for this division. Chiefs, I got them as the number 1 seed in the AFC at 13-4, 4-2 in division. I have the Chargers on their tail, not on their tails. I got the Chargers in second place at 9-8, 3-3 in division. Broncos sit at 7-10, similar to the Giants, like you said, Swig there. Raiders 6-11, 2-4. Gruden gets canned.
Yeah, we actually have the same order on this one. I got the Chiefs 15-2 going first. Chargers 10-7 in second. I got the Broncos 8-9 in third, and I don't trust the Raiders at all. I got 5-12 in fourth place.
Gruden fired.
So, so I got the Chiefs winning with 14 wins, and then I got the Chargers making the playoffs with 10. Then I got the Raiders as the 3 team with 7 wins, and then finishing off with the Broncos with 6 wins.
That's fair. That's fair. And that's also going to do it for today. I appreciate everyone that tuned in. Be sure to check us out on all podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. If you want to see our pretty little faces there, make sure you head on over there. Click subscribe, click like, leave a review, leave a comment, all that good stuff. And click the bell if you're on YouTube to subscribe to our notifications so you know when we post a video. But as always, episodes drop Thursday at noon. Hopefully everybody enjoys the game tonight. Should be a lot of fun between the Bucs and, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. But for Nick, I appreciate you joining us. For Swig, yeah, no problem. For everybody else, everybody watching out there, this has been the Big City Sports Podcast, and we'll see you next time.